generally shocking, at least in comparison centre halves. But to be on 10 points, I did not expect this, to be quite honest with you. I suppose our attack is carried us a little bit, but I cannot complain right now.
Well, it looks like everyone's in a good mood, and that is a great place to be. Adam, how are you feeling? How did Wycombe get on this weekend?
We did manage to scrape a 1-0 win over Northampton Town, so that will probably annoy our fellow resident Tom on the pod. But yeah, scrappy win, but we needed it given the season as how it started. But doing quite well. I'm trying my best not to perspirate and sweat too much. It's already starting to feel a bit like the south of Italy, although no direct comparison, I'm afraid. No direct comparison.
Maybe. Good. Well, this week we've got so much to talk about. In the Premier League, we are going to be talking about Arsenal, of course. We're going to go into Liverpool demolishing Aston Villa. Aston Villa looking pretty weak at the moment. We're going to be talking about Forest in an improving second season. And we're going to be talking about a little bit of Spurs and a little bit of West Ham if we find time. Adam, what are we going to be talking about in Serie A?
In Serie A, we'll start off with the Friday fixtures it was. So we'll talk about Roma taking on Milan. We'll also talk about Lazio and in particular Roma's performance. I'll also, when we've got enough time, we'll dive into Empoli taking on Juventus, doing their best efforts to make me go to sleep last night. And then obviously the big shock result potentially is going to be Napoli and Lazio. I've obviously mentioned about Lazio, but Napoli, lots of thoughts there, Rory. So, yeah, that's what we'll be covering off in Serie A.
Very nice. Well, let's get the ball rolling with the Premier League, and we're going to go to Anfield, where it was Liverpool 5, Aston Villa 1, and Aston Villa looking defensively, nil even, sorry, 5-0, wasn't it? Yeah, 5-0. Aston Villa looking defensively all over the place. Sorry?
3-0.
3-0. Sorry, I'm giving you too much credit there. 3-0 to Liverpool. Aston Villa looking all over the place. James, break down the game for us. How do you feel it went? What were the key moments?
I mean, the key moments, we get the goal within 3 minutes. People do not do very well. Usually we are incredibly slow. But this is what we get these new, attacking-minded midfielders for. Our midfield originally was very workmanlike. Sure, you had Thiago, Navigator, but they between the pair of them. Now we've got Szoboszlai, can do things. And as you saw, that Szoboszlai goal gets the ball rolling. Instantly, Aston Villa. Liverpool, they're confident. They know they can score because Villa, they play quite a high line. They play attacking football. But when you fight attack with Liverpool's attack, usually Liverpool are going to come out on top. And we saw that a lot. And I thought someone who did really well was Darwin Núñez. Like he just from these Trent Alexander-Arnold balls over him, Salah, Diaz. I mean, I love Darwin Núñez. They were the utmost amount of chaos. It was amazing.
I feel like he's always close to getting more goals. Like you can see his confidence growing. He's getting in the right places, but he could have had 2 or 3 yesterday. He hit the post as well, right? I think he came close a few times. Do you think he's really, really close to properly exploding? So I think there's such a great striker in there.
Oh, 100%. As we saw against Newcastle, those two finishes against Newcastle were super clinical. He has got those in him. I think he was very from Salah outside the foot cross. It was a little bit lower, he's definitely going with his foot. A little bit higher, he's definitely going with his head, and he's scoring in that situation. Either way, he got a little bit confused because it's just a very awkward height, and it just went wide. But this guy, he has something about him. Goals, I think it was last season. It's not horrendous. Don't get me wrong. You want more, and especially when there was comparisons season, it's not a good look. But on the face, it was a very solid first start to the season, and scoring in games against Arsenal, Man United, Real Madrid. He's scoring those big games. He's got it in him.
And Adam, why do you think it is? Because it does feel like he gets a bit of a hard time from pundits and stuff. He is quite harshly judged. Why do you think that is?
Maybe because it's perceived that he should do better in certain circumstances. I mean, I've always felt when he came in, he was more of a project striker, and I mean by that is that he's someone that's going to take time. I remember speaking with my friend Jay Pearson on this, and he's obviously from the Copite podcast. And obviously, the main thing that came across was his raw talents. It's like he's really adaptable. I mean, he's crazily like really functional in different ways as well. And I think he's obviously taken a little bit of time to adapt to the Premier League, but also I think it's also what you've seen it last season. There was sometimes where he's overthinking the finish. So when he's one-on-one with the goalkeeper, he's maybe overthinking how he's going to do it. Now that he's got into groove, he's a bit more established, a bit more familiar with the players as well. And I think to James's point, I mean, there was some fantastic through balls by Trent Alexander-Arnold. You can see Szoboszlai really kind of tying up a few of those passes together. I think once they find the right kind of combinations, then I think he's going to be on fire. Like, especially given that I think there's been a lot of pressure in that first instance when he came into the club. I think he covered a lot of the cracks to begin with, because actually it was other players that weren't performing. So I remember at that time we were kind of saying, was Mane the right player to move on? Like, I would have personally gone with Salah, but given the circumstances, I think that's mad when you think about it right now, right? But yeah, I think it's just it's a typical Premier League thing, isn't it? We expect them to go in there and just dominate and be the world-class players that they've been brought in for. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes time. So especially when you think he came from the Portuguese league as well, right? So, I mean, it takes different players, different times. I mean, some will just hit it off straight away, but yeah, I was always under the impression that it would take at least 1 or 2 seasons. I mean, look at how Man City do it as well. They bring in players and they don't necessarily play them straight away for that first season, or at least they get a bit part in terms of that season. So, yeah, I think under Klopp's kind of guidance, I think he's going to get the best out of him, and also Liverpool. So he's a fantastic signing in my eyes anyway.
Yeah, basically not everybody is Erling Haaland, right? Like, not everybody's able to just walk in like they've always been here. But also, I think Liverpool have done really well in the transfer window. Like, the midfield needed addressing. It looked like there was quite a lot of constraint. James, are you happy with who they've brought in? Like, we've been waiting for the Szoboszlai banger. That's what he's been famous for. He's got one. But bringing in players like Endo as well, do you think you've addressed those issues well?
I think we've addressed the 8 position well, because McAllister's not going to be our 6. Like, I don't think anyway. Maybe he will be for this season. About it. We actually really liked in the Bundesliga. It's a very aggressive player. But we needed someone else. I'm not sure who that person was. I would have liked a better and just centre half cover. That's better. Gomez or Matip, although they played very well yesterday, and they played well against Newcastle, to be fair. See that continuing now. I think we needed to address that. However, what I will say is, don't sign too many players in one transfer window. It never works. You've got to be careful how many you sign.
Todd Bowley, are you listening? Todd should be listening at some point. Hopefully he's listening. But a great performance from Liverpool, a great start to the season. As you said, you now find yourselves with 10 points, right up in 3rd place. Goal difference of 6. Really positive start for Aston Villa. Now, we've been talking a lot pre-season and in our Premier League preview about how much we expected from Aston Villa, how much we thought they could push on and maybe be challenging the European spots. They've now won 2, lost 2, but the problem for them defensively, they seem all over the place. They've now conceded 9 goals in 4 games. Adam, what is the main concerns for Villa here? Obviously, beyond Tyrone Mings going out injured, do you think there are other issues there?
I think it's just the way that they play. So obviously you've got 2 quite attacking wing backs in sense of Matty Cash and Lucas Digne. I just think they sometimes, when they go on their kind of marauding runs, they leave the back really open. It was very evident in that Newcastle game. As soon as they bomb forwards, then literally you've got just those 2 or 3 centre backs. It depends how you play it, but obviously he likes to change it during the game kind of phase anyway. And I saw yesterday, for example, there was 2 centre backs at one stage, just having to cope with Salah and whoever's running or spinning off Salah as well at the same time. So I think that's the problem that he has to address. I don't know necessarily if he's actually got the stable midfield that he was craving for potentially. I mean, it feels like it's very attacking minded, but maybe you need someone like a six, someone that can sit in there. But you got Douglas Luiz as well, haven't you? You got Bobikar Kamara. I do wonder whether they just haven't found the right kind of blend at the moment in terms of personnel. To do that job. And I think Unai Emery is actually scratching his head as well for once. I think he thought he had the squad and he's got certainly the depth, but I don't know if he's found the right combination right now, because I always was a bit doubtful about up top, whether the over-reliance on Watkins would be too much. But actually, it feels like now since Mings got that injury against Newcastle, they are kind of lacking at the back. And obviously, we've got to remember, was it Diego Costa as well, being off for the majority of last season as well. He's probably taking some time to get used to whoever's next to him, whether that be Conte or whoever else. So I think it's just finding the right blend of personnel right now. And yeah, maybe they've got a more favourable run going forward, but I think obviously the distraction of Europe is going to play into it as well now. So let's see what he can do. But I think there's a lot of questions for Emery at the moment.
Yeah, I got flashbacks to watching Arsenal just get ravaged on the counter-attack constantly. And I thought any Arsenal fan who still wanted Emery over Arteta, because trust me, they're still out there, needs a lobotomy. I just had so many flashbacks. I just thought it was incredibly, and we'll talk about managers in Italy that did the same, just refusing to learn lessons from continuous teams punishing you and refusing to adapt your tactics. James, do you think Villa have any real reason to be worried? Do you think they'll improve as the season go on? Have you been surprised by their slow start?
Have I been surprised? Not really, because I think they've beaten and lost to the two sides that you could kind of predict they'd lose to. Fair enough, very heavily. I think they'll be fine. Emery's a very good coach. They've still got those attacking options in Diaby, Watkins, Leon Bailey, who I've got so many stocks in Leon Bailey by Leverkusen. I've got all the time in the world for him. It's going to happen. Diego Carlos also went off yesterday very early, which is that's a big worry. They can get hit on the counter, but I really do.
Well, hopefully after the international break, they can come back and have a little bit of improvement. But from there, we're going to leave Anfield and we're going to go over to North London, where I think my heart rate, honestly, it felt like my heart was coming out of my neck at one point. It was just a horrific 90 minutes. I hated every second of it until about the 95th minute. Of course, I'm talking about Arsenal 3, Manchester United 1. Now, I think this game, I'm just going to give my 2 cents and see what you guys think. But I think a win covers a million sins. I think Arsenal actually weren't that good. I think we didn't attack the game the way we should have. I think we were far too passive. We let Manchester United have the ball. I think we could have punished them a lot more than we did. I think we were too slow. I think there's a lot to be improved in that performance. That being said, I don't care because we won. I think the key moments were, of course, the disallowed goal by from Garnacho. Anybody here think it was onside? Because I think it was fairly clear-ish that it was offside. James, I'll go for you first. Do you think there's any controversy over that goal?
No, not really. And if United fans want to cry about it, let's go back to last season. Old Trafford, Rashford scores a goal. He's even closer to being offside. And they get... I'm not having any of their tears. No. In my opinion. Go cry about it, seriously.
That's what I like to hear. You can come back, definitely. And then the other contentious decision that we had was a penalty appeal for Højlund, which I personally think was very soft, and a foul on the Declan Rice goal. Adam, any of them, do you think there's a reason for complaints for United?
Start off with Højlund. No, can't see it. I think he kind of goes into it looking for it. It's the typical Serie A striker thing, right? Looking for any touch that he can get.
Grab the defender.
Just fall over. For the Rice goal, I couldn't really see. I think it's the usual kind of thing that happens at corners. I mean, I think at one point, actually, Gabriel gets pulled down. But I think, if anything, the funniest thing about that goal was it had to come off Harry Maguire, didn't it? Had to come off Harry Maguire. He's not getting any luck whatsoever. And yeah, I mean, it was inevitable that would happen. But I mean, huge question marks about Johnny Evans being introduced. I don't know what happened there, but yeah, as soon as he got brought in, he got bullied by Gabriel Jesus. And yeah, I mean, even for that splitting run, like towards that kind of third goal, I don't know where he was. I mean, I saw at the other end, ironically, when Arsenal were cheering, obviously that third goal, Harry Maguire was just walking back. He wasn't even trying to run back. It's just, I don't know how this guy gets into the England squad. I really don't.
It blows my mind that Manchester United finished that game in 2023 with a centre-back partnership of Maguire and Johnny Evans. It blows my mind. I do not know how that happened, but thank God it did. And I thought when Harry Maguire came on, the Arsenal fans started cheering and singing his name. And I was like, this could really bite us in the arse. Like, I do not like this. This could go really wrong. Thankfully, it didn't. But I think the best thing about this isn't even the game. It's the fact that Manchester United have now gone into meltdown post-game with Jadon Sancho posting statements about Ten Hag. The whole thing just looks like a bin fire, and I'm just looking going, oh, that could have been us. That so could have been us. It was a game decided on fine margins. But I have to talk about Declan Rice. I just think he is, when we signed him, I thought he was the surest thing we had. Like the surest transfer out there. You buy him, you know exactly what you're going to get. And I'm relieved to be right. I'm so relieved I'm right. He's come in, he's fitting straight away. And I think that game, all he did was just add a calmness to midfield. He controlled possession. Every time the ball was lost or every time he got the second ball, it was just recycling possession, keeping the ball going. He was just absolutely flawless. And for him to get that goal, for him to have that first big moment at the Emirates, to see how much he absolutely loved it. I just think it was an incredible moment. And it feels like from here, Arsenal's season is this is the kickstart of the season. We started quite slowly, obviously, the draw against Fulham, scraped it against Forest, scraped it against Palace. This feels like the season kicking off now. This feels like a real start. I'm going to go, James, were you impressed by Arsenal's performance yesterday? What did you think?
I mean, to a degree, I thought the game was. If I'm being honest, I didn't catch the first half until the goal because I was picking my parents up from the air.
Okay,
so I timed that really well.
Yeah.
But from what I hear, it was a very quiet first half besides the goals. A big turning point I also think was the Havertz penalty decision. Well, it was given, but then it wasn't given. I still think it was a little bit harsh to not give it. They had given it. It's a weird one to turn over because there is contact. Very surprised by that. You get back to Declan Rice. This dude, he does everything. He's around the pitch, makes every tackle. He can pass, and as we saw, something I do need to talk about with that goal is Harry Maguire. We need to bully Harry Maguire some more. What he does. Criminal. The ball goes into the box. Declan Rice chests it down. Maguire's too busy looking at the Johnny Evans whole debacle, and he's not pressing Rice. That's why Rice has so long to shoot. But the Arsenal performance, I think it was deserved of a win. Only just. I really did.
I will absolutely take that. And Adam, for Manchester United, how much of a cause of concern is this? Because they were an inch away from arguably winning the game with that Garnacho goal. I think that would have been the winner. I don't know. Maybe Arsenal would have got an equaliser, but I think that probably would have been the winner. So they're an inch away from that. Do you think they're going to overreact now, or do you think they need to remain a little bit calm and there's not actually that much to worry about?
I think there's a few question marks over that performance. For me, it was clear that Ten Hag wanted to counter-attack against Arsenal. He kind of accepted that they weren't going to dominate in terms of the possession stats. And for me, they just didn't offer enough in terms of attacking options. And you can see by kind of the 75th minute mark, it was Casemiro's literally blowing hard because he's done a lot of running around. Now, there was a lot of question marks a few weeks ago about his fitness and whether he can actually sustain the whole season, whether he's actually had a pre-season, more to the point, I suppose. But I just worry about how they're going to approach it going forward because they can't keep on doing what they've been doing in the last few games. I mean, it's not just this game. Obviously, we saw against Wolves, they were really lethargical in terms of that press. They, we don't know what Mason Mount is doing half the time because he's going either in attacking roles or he's sitting back. You just don't know what he's doing. And now he's off for like 6-7 weeks at the moment, as it's reported. I really do struggle to kind of work out what the kind of areas that Ten Hag is trying to address here, because even with the selection, it's really odd. It's really odd that you're not having players like Scott McTominay being in that squad, just as an option off the bench, just to give some like sort of fresh legs to it. But yeah, I do worry from the Man United perspective that they don't do enough based on what we've seen so far to win games. I thought it almost felt like a smash and grab when Garnacho did score that. But even when Rashford scored, it was based on that little mistake and they're very quick to counter. That's the advantage they've got. But other than that, they are really reliant on maybe the back line kind of picking out those balls that, say, Trent Alexander-Arnold's doing for Liverpool. I just can't see that happening, though, with the kind of players they've got at this disposal right now. So I think there's a lot to be questioned at Ten Hag still, actually, because I think he's had the summer, he's had the opportunity to get his way of thinking across, and I don't actually feel like they've progressed too much. They haven't strengthened in the areas they needed to. So, yeah, lots to worry about. But equally, I think from an Arsenal perspective, they made it easy for Man United at times. They made it easy. They didn't do enough with those set plays, which I messaged to you a few times going, why the hell isn't Odegaard
it was frustrating
taking these?
It was frustrating. Yeah. It was very frustrating. I think with Ten Hag, it's interesting because they don't really, I couldn't tell you what style they have. And this is his second season now, right? This is his second full season. I couldn't tell you what style he's trying to implement. They turned up and played, like, no disrespect to Nottingham Forest, but they turned up and played like Nottingham Forest did against us. Like, they had exactly the same game plan, but Nottingham Forest had a game plan B. Like, they had a backup. United didn't. I couldn't tell you what their actual plan was. But, James, I'm going to go for you. Like, do you think United should be, like, how patient do you think they'll be with Ten Hag? 'Cause it does feel like the noise is getting pretty loud for September.
The noise is getting loud, but that's because my United fan base is just loud, and there's a lot of them. They will keep him. They will trust him. They've allowed this guy to get rid of Cristiano Ronaldo, one of their greatest players ever, just because he kicked up a little bit of a fuss. I don't know what the plan is personally, but I do think there is a plan. The one thing I kind of have an issue with is that he plays so different home and away. Like, it's not really ideal. You need to set this play style that you are going to play. Jurgen Klopp doesn't really change the way he plays, home or away.
Yeah.
Neither does Pep. You need to have this one in, so your players can just get used to it. Now, the one thing that United really struggled with going forward, they looked a bit poor. That's because they got. I think Højlund coming in is the difference maker. You saw with those last 10-15 minutes, the runs he made, the strength he showed on the ball, what he did for the Garnacho goal. It was night and day, the difference. And I'm intrigued to see how it does against low block teams, as opposed to these just counter-attacking teams like Arsenal, Liverpool. In those games, he will be very good. But I haven't seen that's one to play very counter-attack, all-out attack football under. So I'm interested to see how he adapts to those types of plays.
Very nice. Well, we're going to leave Arsenal United there for now. I think I'm just going to take the points and run. Very, very happy with that. And we're going to move on to. Let's go to Stamford Bridge. Shall we go to Stamford Bridge? This was a lot of fun. Chelsea 0, Nottingham Forest 1. Adam, I'm going to go to you first. Thoughts from this game? There are so many moments I found entertaining. But what were your first impressions from this game?
I couldn't believe the scoreline, to be fair. I mean, looking back at even the highlights, you kind of like, what does Pochettino need to do with this squad? I mean, it still feels like a team in transition. They don't seem to have an identity at the moment still, and they're just lacking ideas up top as well. Like, I mean, I know Jackson's comes in with a lot of hype from Villarreal, but actually he's not imposing himself enough at top. He's not really. But then also, do you think the deliveries aren't good enough because they're just being put into the box with no aim in particular? I mean, it's just a bit of a kind of baffling kind of element that you think, well, Pochettino's had a few months now with these players. He's obviously decided
he doesn't even know their names yet. He needs to learn their names first.
He doesn't, does he? So yeah, this feels like you just write off this season again. But this is a problem about how many more seasons you write off now, because it's going to come to a point where like there's going to be pressure on Todd's to actually deliver because he's put so much money into this now, isn't there? So I'm baffled by the whole kind of projects at the very beginning. Even these kind of signings, they don't feel like there's a structure behind them. There's a rationale behind them. And as we alluded to, you got all these players that are going to make a lot of mistakes during this whole process. How are you going to do that if you don't have any experienced heads around them? So it's just going to be a massive car crash, but one that we're enjoying because, you know, we're seeing it from afar and kind of laughing at Chelsea, but Chelsea fans aren't enjoying this one bit whatsoever.
Look, honestly, I feel like this is going to end so disastrously and nobody's talking about it. Like on Sky Sports News, they're just like £1 billion spent. Amazing. £1 billion. Like, you know, this doesn't end well, right? None of this ends well. But on the pitch, it all looked, you're completely right. It was aimless balls into the box. The vibe I got off Nicholas Jackson was like that, a striker in a relegation team where every chance matters so much that when you get that chance, you just shit your pants. And it just feels like the pressure on him already is so high. And then you jump on Twitter and Chelsea fans are like, oh, what we need to do is in January, we just need to buy another striker. It's like, do you guys not learn? Like, you're just never going to learn. James, can you see any kind of plan behind this squad? Like, if you're Poch, how do you even begin to try and get this into a team?
I actually do think you wait a little bit, as ridiculous as that sounds. This is the youngest squad in the league over in the team. I think the average age is like 22 and a half years of age.
I never thought you'd say that, but yeah.
But it's still a lot of injuries. You think Badiashile, Fofana, player is injured. You've got Nkunku, who I think will be good at Chelsea, to be quite honest with you. They've got to stop this just sack mentality. Bowley's already got, like, you can't be doing this, really, can you? In regards to Nicholas Jackson, I was very unsure of him in the first place, quite simply because at Villarreal, got 12 goals last season, and all that, that's fine. It's only until you realise that 10 of them came in late April and May. Is that a purple patch? Like, really?
Yeah.
You're a striker. They're taking a lot of risks. That's all. If they sack Pochettino, it's kind of like, well, what was the point? And Poch, again, I him. This dude had Messi and Mbappe, named all the players in the world, and made him look average. He gave Messi his worst season in club football.
That is impressive, to be fair. That is quite impressive. But I think, that's well done. But I think with Poch, it's weird, isn't it? Because he did kind of underachieve at PSG. And with Spurs, obviously, he came so close. There is kind of a thing of finding out if he is a decent manager properly or not, I suppose. But with Chelsea, it's all been said, but Nottingham Forest fans are going to be pulling their hair out because they do deserve a lot of credit. They were fantastic. And I feel like this season, or let's start with last season. Last season, when they conceded 1 goal, they'd often go on to concede 5 and they just get absolutely battered. And I compared, obviously, because I mainly watch Arsenal, I compared when we played Forest at home last season and this season. We smashed them 5-0 last year. This season, they made it really nervous towards the end, and they had a plan B. The whole game, they were much more structured defensively. It just felt like Steve Cooper has almost raised expectations and been like, okay, we've survived now, and we were grateful for every point we got. But this season, it's about performance and points on top, as well as fleshing out the squad and being able to have that plan B. Like, Awani came off the bench against Arsenal. He wasn't their first choice. Like last season, he was starting every minute. Gibbs White isn't their only creative player. It feels like they're starting to get a little bit more quality there. And within this performance, yes, it was massively backs to the wall, right? It was like 10 men behind the ball, but they were still able to be more dangerous than Chelsea at all throughout the game. And when they did get forward, Anthony Elanga was really impressive. I thought a player that we talked about pre-season, we weren't sure about how he was going to do, but he's been fantastic for them so far. Joe Worrell with an incredible performance, like just absolute warrior performance there. Adam, I'm going to go to you first. Who impressed you most, or what impressed you most about Forest? Do you think there's been a big improvement?
I'm going to have to have a bit of humble pie when I say this, but Anthony Elanga, I mean, that guy, I thought he was going to be a waste of money at the sums that they spent for him, but he really is starting to come into his own here. And I think just the fact that he kind of went in and scored that goal, I mean, tells you a lot about him now and his confidence levels right now. But yeah, special word. You've already said it, but Joe Worrell, his performance was incredible, given the circumstances as well about his uncle, which is tragic in itself. But just for him to be able to come onto the pitch and do that performance is absolutely incredible. So fair play to him. But yeah, special word for Steve Cooper, I think, as well, because I think he's taken a while to adapt. I think under maybe other owners, he probably would have been shown the door. I don't think he would be there, but I think the fact that, their chairman has given trust to him, knew that there was much more to the project. And I think it's also down to the circumstances. They sold or bought in 30 players, wasn't it, last summer? I think it goes back to kind of, James's point, which is don't bring so many players. But yeah, Nottingham Forest did. They had to, because they were mainly loanees, weren't they, in that squad? So yeah, he's got a settled team now, and I think that's really helping them. So fair play to them.
Yeah, I think they're looking really good. Like, James, do you think they can? Where do you think they can get to this season? Have you been impressed with Steve Cooper?
Yeah, I mean, Steve Cooper is literally what happens when you trust a manager. Team that don't trust their managers and they go and win. These dudes, they can do something. I mean, I was watching them. I've only against Chelsea, but even then, the way they defend the box, they're a team. They're just a unit. And even some clips, it was like, you ever seen the clips of Total Football? Dutch players just rushing a defender. A couple of instances there. I was like, what am I watching here? This is incredible. But these have got the attacking options. Someone I've rated for a long time. I've always looked at him because he used to be at Liverpool. He's a player who I just always thought, that was the academy. Why do we never give him a go? And we have a striker as well. This is just before the Firmino era. Maybe he was a bit too young at the time. But this guy can hold up the ball. He can score. Brings other people into play. I'm glad he's done well because I've backed him in my FPL team for like over a year now.
I've had him in fantasy as well. I was so happy.
In my FPL draft, I put him in both of them because I've known him. And in Berlin know how to bring players in. Trust in them. They can. Could they finish top half? I think that's a little bit of a stretch, personally. They can get that Palace place of 12th, in my opinion.
I think you're completely right. And they've even got Sangare still to come into the team, who I am super excited to see in the Premier League. Absolute baller in the AFCON. Amazing for PSV. I'm really excited to see him play. I think he could add some real quality there as well. So exciting times for Nottingham Forest, and ex-Arsenal man Matt Turner keeps a clean sheet at Stamford Bridge. You love to see it. Also, last mention, the moment that made me burst out laughing was Elanga absolutely ending Mudryk's career in the last couple of minutes and then bouncing the ball off the post. That was pretty painful to watch. I really feel sorry for Mudryk at this point. I genuinely feel sorry for him. The last game we're going to talk about in the Premier League, I think, is, should we go for, who are we going to talk about? Let's talk about, it West Ham?
Brighton.
Oh, Brighton. We need to talk about Brighton. Adam, take us through the Brighton game.
It's certainly a kind of matchup that I was really looking forward to, given obviously the whole drop back, I suppose, of De Zerbi versus Eddie Howe, and obviously a lot of anticipation about Newcastle. You yourself had some interesting words about.
I need to apologise.
We got confused with some Geordie fans. We're definitely not Geordie fans, that's for sure. But anyway, Brighton, just from the offset, seems like they were coping with it a lot better. I mean, they were trying to do that high press. Both sides were doing it, but Brighton were doing it much better. I think, if anything, it was just that breakthrough moment where Nick Pope kind of tries to bash the ball out and he doesn't hit it with a lot of conviction, which lands at the feet of Estepana. And he obviously manages to do a few dummies before Matoma gets it into the box. And then it kind of rebounds out of the box. Billy Gilmore shoots after Sandro Tonali fails to, don't know what he was doing,
anything.
but he fails to hit it away anyway. And then it was kind of just bounces off Nick Pope for Ferguson to tap it into the net. So 1-0. And from that moment onwards, you kind of thought maybe Newcastle stand a chance. They got into half-time at 1-0 only. But second half, it was all about that boy, Ferguson, Evan Ferguson. Got it right this time.
Evan, good work.
Evan Ferguson. But yeah, I mean, the boy looks incredible. I mean, I'm surprised there wasn't enough clubs in for his services, given the backdrop about him. And I think Brighton deserve a lot of credit because there seems to be that kind of story that they brought him in with special dispensation from FIFA because they weren't allowed to sign him that early on. I think it was like 13 years old. They tried to sign him in. But he looks a hell of a prospect now. And you think Spurs obviously got roughly about 100 million for Kane. He's easily worth 80 million alone based on...
He can't go to Spurs. He can't go to Spurs. I do not want Ireland's future star to be playing for Tottenham. I can't handle it. I cannot handle it.
But he was a hell of a prospect. I mean, yeah, if he continues like this, I mean, it's just incredible what kind of talent they've got on their hands. I mean, yeah, he just looks the part. And I think that's the problem was Newcastle gave him almost too much respect after he scored that goal, which helped him with the second goal. Essentially, Dan Burn fails to kind of put any pressure on him and he slots it past Nick Pope. I thought at the moment, Nick Pope should have maybe done better. But actually, when you look at replays, it's actually the defenders in front of him giving him far too much respect, should I say, sorry. And then for the third one, it's just deflection and it's game over by that point. So there's nothing Newcastle can do. But yeah, I think there's a lot of words around Newcastle and whether Eddie Howe will still be there by the end of the season if they have displays like this. I mean,
if he gets invited for a meeting by the owners, he's going to be absolutely crapping himself. Can I bring a witness, please? I'd feel safer with someone else in the room. I have to go into Evan Ferguson before we go to Newcastle. I have to remind myself that he's 18. You look at the size of him,
I had to
and
look
how
back up. Yeah.
he's absolutely massive. I thought, when they said it, like 18 years old, I was like, Jesus Christ! Like he's more of a man than I am. I'm 34. You know, he's much more developed than I am. It's insane. But James, how impressed were you with Brighton? Billy Gilmore as well, stealing a lot of headlines. A player that maybe Chelsea could do with.
Typical Chelsea get rid of the wrong player, don't they? Yeah. Dude,
what more could say
about Brighton and Hove Albion? They just pluck these players from thin air from whichever country they fancy, and best thing, aren't they? And they've got another one with Evan Ferguson. They're intense. They can play football. Even their goalkeeper can play football, who I've never even heard of. Do you see that little fake shot?
Yeah.
That's like, what? This isn't fair.
Who is this guy?
My one worry with Brighton is that someone will pick up De Zerbi. De Zerbi is a...
I can't really describe him.
It's a manager who I'm not sure would do well at the top level.
He was at Sassuolo before,
wasn't he? Am I right in saying?
Yeah.
That
Sassuolo, yeah.
Feels like his level.
Be interested to see how big egos. I mean, Evan Ferguson though. Evan Ferguson. This dude's incredible. As you say, he's a physical freak. 10 Premier League goals already? I think he's like the 4 or 10 goals, which is mental. When you think about it, I'm guessing like Owen and Fowler are the quicker.
Yeah.
He's a physical freak. He's off those Harry Kane vibes, and the goals themselves, they're probably not that aesthetically. Even the second one, I wouldn't say it's that nice to look at just because of the goalkeeping. But as a striker, as a coach, you are buzzing with that because the first one, he's anticipating the mistake from Pope, and he's been rewarded with it. We just mentioned Billy Gilmore. It's because of a pretty poor Billy Gilmore touch. And instantly thinks, I need to make myself an option. And he pushes himself in front of the back line to make himself available. And Gilmore just gets a little... Evan Ferguson
Runs, shoots.
it's not good keeping from Nick Pope, in my opinion. He leaves so much open, and then as you said, a third goal. Yeah, it's just a massive deflection. There's no point trying to tap one. It's a look,
but he gets away with it.
I'm interested to see how Brighton do in the future. They give off those weird Southampton vibes. You know how they keep on finding players, keep on selling them. Eventually, will that run out?
Yeah,
it has to, surely.
It feels like teams do have cycles. Like we talked about Wolves, we've talked about Southampton. These were teams that everyone was modelling themselves on for a very long time. Leicester, were the model club to run. So it's how long can you keep that cycle going? Is it sustainable? I feel like personally, I think with Brighton, it feels a bit more sustainable because they have lost a lot of staff to Chelsea, including players, but also backroom staff. They've lost heads of recruitment. They've lost everything. And the thing still seems to be continuing. So I think Tony Bloom has implemented a thing that makes it a little bit more sustainable. But we'll see. And they have to deal with Europe coming up soon. And that is kind of a challenge for every team. You get into Europe and then inevitably your league position drops a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see. But incredible performance from them. Newcastle, I really enjoy watching them lose. I really enjoy watching Eddie Howe be upset, and that was just really, really nice to see. We are going to have to move on from Premier League. I think we're going to leave it there for the Premier League.
Yeah.
And we're going to go all across to Italy, and we're going to start talking some Serie A action. Let's start with, should we start with the first game? Should we do Milan-Roma first, Adam?
Let's do that. Yeah.
Roma 1, Milan 2. Spinazzola getting a late goal for Roma. Olivier Giroud, of course, and Rafael Leao getting the goals for Milan. A very contentious red card for Fikayo Tomori was kind of the turning point of this game. But if we start from the beginning, how impressive were Milan? And Roma were nowhere near it, right, Adam?
They were nowhere near it, no. And Milan just looks superb from the very first game of the season to now. I mean, it's very hard to not consider them as Scudetto potentials right now. The squad depth is a lot better than they used to have. When you compare the way they probably would have approached the same game last season, I think they go into it with a bit more tension and I think reliance on certain players like Leao. Whereas now, that spread responsibility. And I think the runs of Loftus-Cheek is obviously helping as well because he's being used in such a controlled manner, but he's being used to obviously help protect the ball and just maintain it and just distribute it again and again. And with him and Pulisic at the moment, pulling all the strings at the moment, it seems like they've got something there going right now. They're very solid at the back. We've always liked the kind of centre-back pairing as well as potentially when you look at the goalkeeping situation, I think it's one of the strongest in the leagues. But yeah, I mean, there's not a lot more you can say that, that performance deserves. I think it's just been absolutely superb. But Roma look a shadow of themselves from last season. I mean, they look like they're entering that kind of hobo season that we joke about with Jose, where it's the last season that he doesn't really care. But yeah, I don't.
That beard is about to grow out. He's going to start wearing hoodies. You'll see it.
Yeah, basically. So, but yeah, I don't know what to make of this Roma side because we did say they need a striker. But Lukaku, I don't think he's the answer, unfortunately. Even on his one chance that he had, I mean, that was what he did for Inter, wasn't it? Just blast one over the kind of bar. And I don't really know where you go from here because they've spent a lot of money on his wages. Could they have spent that somewhere else? Personally, I think they could have.
I think there's not a much more depressing sight than Belotti coming off and Lukaku coming on. It's just replacing with just a big lump up front who don't really do much. James, what did you make of Roma? I was kind of excited about their transfer business and their squad and thought, there's a little bit of a ragtag bunch here that could put up a bit of a fight. It was really disappointing, right?
Yeah, they're a ragtag bunch, but what they lack is pace. They have no pace. Don't get me wrong, their injury record isn't ideal. You got Sanchez, who I think will have a very good season. He seems like a very good Serie A player. That one I wasn't too sure at because even at Lyon, I don't think he was playing. And then Dybala, Abraham, both injured. This is my issue with Roma. So much of their squad are just heavily injury prone. And with a manager like Mourinho, he will just throw these lot under the bus. No problem. And I think mentally it could
manage them.
And with the fans, the Roma fans, they're quite brutal anyway. They'll let their opinions be known. Mentally, this Roma side could struggle, and against Milan, they just got outfought, out tactics, out absolutely everything. Spinazzola scored a goal. Milan deserved the win.
Yeah. It was only the red card, which I think was a ridiculous decision, just to put my flag in the ground. I can't believe Tomori was sent off for that. It was only that really changed the game, I think, and gave Roma any real, it was classic Roma. And I think I said it in our post-match reaction. Last season, they only started playing when they were 2-0 down, and they did the same. They did the same this weekend. So I think it was only the red card that turned it. But we do need to give me some praise. You mentioned Ruben Loftus-Cheek. He's fit into that midfield unbelievably. I love the runs he was making into the box, including the run that got them the penalty. Right, I feel like he's physically more than capable of keeping up with this league. Technically fantastic. A player that we've seen when he was on loan at Fulham and he was getting games. I remember he did really well. It just always felt like he never really got that consistent chance at Chelsea. Shock. Or it was injuries that got in the way. But we're seeing a real player here. And I was talking to someone, oh my God, who was it? A Milan fan. And they were saying that he thinks, now this is a hot take, Loftus-Cheek is a better player than Tonali, and Milan have actually upgraded in that position. Now, I thought that is, I'm going to have a few more games to think about that one, but he was pretty insistent on the fact that he thought Ruben Loftus-Cheek was a better all-round player, which shows how well he's at least started his life in Milan. But as you said, not an over-reliance on Leao. But even without that, without over-relying on him, he still stood out, was still fantastic, an incredible goal. And I'm reminded of just how scary that left-hand side is with Teo and him. It's just absolutely petrifying. So an incredible performance from Milan. Were there any other players that stood out for you within that game?
No one that springs to mind. I think the big thing, though, I would call out is Tomori being sent off means he misses the Milan derby when they come back from the internationals. Now, having said that, Tomori never really performs well in those derbies. He normally kind of struggles in those games. So that could be a blessing in disguise. But you are relying on maybe moving Kalulu into that centre with TL and maybe bringing someone else in. Maybe that be Simon Kjær. I don't know for sure. But yeah, I'm sure it's going to add a little bit more spice to that game if there wasn't already one, Rory. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be. I was looking at the fixture, bloody hell, straight off the international break, Milan derby. Oh, you're spoiling us. You're spoiling us,
Rory.
But yeah, so with it. Sorry,
you've made me
worry.
You've made me worry now. You just said that left-hand side of Leao and
Hernandez.
Oh, mate, if Liverpool come up against them in the Europa League, oh my word, Trent is going to have a nightmare.
It genuinely, I think it's one of the best left-hand sides in world football. I think you do really well to find a better left-hand pairing than Leao and Teo. It is incredible.
They've got goals in them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Teo is still, I know it's only 3 games in, but he's still owed his annual coast to coast. So it's going to happen against someone. It's just we don't know who the victim's going to be yet. We don't know who it's going to be. But Milan do find themselves second, 3 wins out of 3, absolutely smashing it. Roma, without a win in the relegation zone, 2 losses and a draw, really not the start they had in mind. And of course, in classic Mourinho fashion, to take the spotlight away from the game, he refused to do the press conference after the match. I don't know what he could possibly have had to complain about. They literally gifted him a man advantage and they still weren't able to do anything with it. But yeah, classic Mourinho. We do love it, really. We do love it. Should we move on? The next Serie A game we need to talk about. Let's go down to Naples. They did it last year. They've done it again this year. Lazio love upsetting the Portenape as a Napoli that do not look even close to last year's Napoli. Struggled and strained against Lazio, but were not able to get the win. James, what were your first impressions of this game? Let's talk about Napoli before we give Lazio some praise.
Yeah, my word. They once you lose a manager like Spalletti, he's so specific in his way. Changing from Spalletti to anyone is going to be quite drastic, and changing from Spalletti to Rudy Garcia, it's such a noticeable difference. you see I think you notice the difference in Lobotka. If he can't control a game, he is not as anywhere near as influential as he can be. And that drop off as well.
He was so good last season.
He was very aggressive. And all of a sudden they drop off to Juan.
Jesus, it's not
the same, is it? I know they've signed a Brazilian centre half whose name I'm not going to bother pronouncing because it's not Nathan. But there's no H. And however I said it, it'll be wrong. Mario Rui as well not starting. That one confused me. Has he asked to leave? I believe. Is that right? But obviously, that's not
I think there was. Yeah, there was Saudi links. I want to say that he had his head turned. I think it was by Saudi Arabia, and him and Garcia weren't seeing eye to eye. But he's a player that Adam we talked about last year a lot as to how key, absolutely fundamental he was to Napoli's performances. It was a strange decision not to start him, and I think James, you touched on an interesting point there: the centre back partnership. Now, Kim. We all knew how good he was last season, but watching that Lazio game, I really realized how good he was last season because not only the aggressiveness that you talked about, but his ability on the ball as well, his reading of the game, his ability to just calm everything down. I thought Rahmani and Juan Jesus just looked like rabbits in the headlights every single time Lazio came forward. They were wide open, and again, going back to Unai Emery, Rudy Garcia refused to learn lessons about Lazio just marauding through that defense. And I think we really saw a huge drop off in Napoli. And I think the biggest difference is going to be, as you said, that Spalletti isn't there and that they've replaced him with Rudy Garcia. Now, this is a manager who is a fairly middling manager. I think that Napoli in 2008 probably appoint Rudy Garcia, if you know what I mean. Not a Napoli who have just won the title. It feels like a huge step back. I was trying to think, if you're De Laurentiis, obviously he doesn't like people who challenge his opinion, right? He likes yes men. But if you're looking for managers, who are you looking at? And I thought the only one that I thought was of a level that could push them, and I don't know how realistic this is, but Nagelsmann is on the market. Maybe you try and approach him and say, look, this is a project. We've just won the Scudetto. You can get your career back on track, whatever it is. I just feel like it wasn't quite ambitious enough going for Rudy Garcia. James, how do you feel about Garcia?
The problem with a club like Napoli is they're very backs against the wall against them.
Always has been.
Rudy Garcia is not a type of manager. The best thing about Spalletti was that he'd never won a Scudetto, I believe, right? 19 years to our career. And he plays that attacking style of football. The Neapolitan does that. Not quite the same with Rudy Garcia. I don't think he suits the club in general as Spalletti did. And then losing the gonna help. You've got all these Osimhen rumors in the background. It sounds like he's going to leave in the summer. And people kind of understand how to play against
now. He's a very young
player, but if you can double up on him, you severely hamper him. And something Lazio did very well was deal with any crosses. I can't remember who was at centre half for Lazio, but
Romagnoli.
Romagnoli heading everything away against Osimhen. I just don't think tactically Rudy Garcia is a good
enough coach, but at the same time,
he's also not. He's not got that personality that you need to be
someone key
in Naples.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it was kind of a cult of personality with Spalletti a little bit, wasn't it? And it feels like that definitely isn't there with Garcia now. But let's give Lazio their due credit. This is 2 years. Twice in 2 years that they've turned up to the Diego Armando Maradona and they've come away with 3 points. They were absolutely fantastic. I think the first half, they were kind of feeling it out, not really sure, a little bit cautious, but they were really able to catch them on the break every single time. Adam, who were the players that stood out for you the most for Sarri's men?
There's quite a few, isn't there? But we start off with the obvious one, Anderson. The guy came from West Ham and we thought he was washed up. That was the end of him. And then he performs like this. And this is not just this season. It's obviously last few seasons. Even last season, he was spectacular for them. So, his constant running and Maisie runs assist as well in this game as well. I mean, you've got to hand it to him. I was always miffed by when Kamada didn't get that move to Milan, why there wasn't more in for him. Because what I saw at Frankfurt was this really great midfielder that has got a lot of legs. He can run. Obviously, it's taken him a while because obviously the games against Lecce was a bit underwhelming. Again, against Genoa, it didn't feel like he kind of got to grips with the game. And then in this game, he completely, again, just dominated the play. I thought he was really impressive. And for that goal, again, impressive. Guendouzi, the guy, I wrote him off last week and said he would be terrible. But
My
again,
boy,
he
my
was
boy,
unlucky.
he
He was
did
unlucky
it.
with that goal. He scored a spectacular goal that got ruled off as well. So, I mean, there's so many players. I mean, Louis Alberto as well, another player that's been really good last season. Again, in this particular match. And this is the thing with Sarri. It's amazing. He plays this like fluid football, but when he wants to be, he can play structured football as well, like, you know, counter-attacking style football that doesn't necessarily have to be sort of all the time pass, but he can kind of absorb the kind of pressure and just take it on. And he's got a fantastic squad, it has to be said. But I mean, fair play to Sarri. I think there was a lot of pressure on him. When you look at their fixture lineup as well, it looks quite tense. But this kind of win relieves a little bit of pressure off him. They now go into the international break, and then they follow it up with going back to his old club, Juventus, as well. So I'm looking forward to that match. That's going to be
a spicy one.
Yeah.
That's going to be a spicy one. I think the Kamada one's really interesting because I think he's adapted his role a little bit. I think the first two games he had him much more defensive minded. I think he wasn't giving him that full reign to just go forward and bomb on. But Kamada is perfectly capable of doing that. And I think this game he really gave him that license to just go and just get those late runs into the box, join the counterattacks. I think we really saw Kamada come on from there. Brilliant finish. Delighted for him to get that goal. Like, yeah, a player we've all really enjoyed watching at Frankfurt. I think for the first goal, Felipe Anderson and Luis Alberto linking up together, it was a thing of beauty. Brazilian magic, a nice little back heel spin into the net. Really, really beautiful moment. And I think, I was panicking about my Lazio Serie A prediction, Scudetto winners prediction. I now feel a little bit more relieved that, okay, he's still got it. We're still not out of it. And there's still a possibility. James, what do you think Lazio fans can expect under Sarri this season? Do you think it feels like he's fleshed out the squad a bit more now, right?
Yeah, I still think realistically they can look at top four.
That's
more to do with, I'd say, the quality of the teams around him. I think you've got Inter, Milan. I think Juve, say it quietly. I think Juve will finish out of doing something here, Juve. They're a weird side. I think Lazio could definitely get top four. And the best thing about like a Maurizio Sarri is, sure, he's got this style of play that's very attacking, but it's not like a Bielsa or even go further back as an example. You know, it's not. It's not. Those managers are like, I would rather lose my way than win your way. Sarri is a little bit different like that. He can be that pragmatic style, and we saw that against Napoli. He identifies, okay, they have these two brilliant forwards in Kvaratskhelia and Osimhen. Let's just chill a bit. Let's close them down. Let's just show we'll hit them on a counter attack. And to be fair, it worked wonders because Napoli had no idea what to do. Realistically, I think Lazio could look at a top four finish, though. I don't think they get Scudetto.
I'm still going to push the boat. I'm still going to hold out belief a little bit longer, but I'm hearing that a lot. Don't worry. I'm hearing that a lot. So we're going to leave that there. A fantastic win for Lazio. Napoli need to get some kind of groove going before the international break ends. And we are going to move on to, let's go for Empoli 0, Juventus 2. Now, not the most obvious game to go to, but Adam, you wanted to talk about both teams here. Talk us through this game. You did manage to stay awake. I watched the first half and then turned over. I put on something else. I saw this.
I do not blame you for putting it off. But yeah, no, it was one of those games that Empoli didn't necessarily play badly, but unfortunately, just due to the fluke of Juventus, they always seem to just grab a goal, don't they? They always seem to win this kind of games. And it did look a bit hairy at times. It wasn't the most pleasant of matches, let's put it that way. But I think the reason why I want to call this out is I'm starting to fear for Empoli. I feel like they're a side that potentially we've underestimated in terms of I think they haven't done enough business. They're relying on Caputo even, sorry. But the service isn't there. And, Tommaso Baldanzi, who we've been really raving, he does a lot of runs. Unfortunately, he hasn't got the squad with him. He hasn't got enough depth in there. And I think Paolo Zanetti, obviously the coach down there at Empoli, is really going to struggle with this squad, I think. They need to add some big players, I think, in January. But the problem is, will he get the chance to kind of carry on, I suppose, is the main emphasis here. Juventus, on the other hand, Vlahovic looks, I don't know, he doesn't look like a player with confidence. But again, he missed a penalty. He missed a penalty last night. It was a really soft penalty. But the one bright spot was Chiesa. Chiesa looks like he's trying to create opportunities. I think he just needs a bit more of a solid base. Sometimes he needs someone around him to kind of do the 1-2 touches. I think he's missing that kind of player. And with Moretti, for example, he was pinging these balls that were going nowhere near the Juventus players. And I know there's been a lot of words around certain players that they've moved on since, but actually there's still that issue of Juventus, is that they haven't really established the issues. They haven't really tackled them. Defensively, they can be caught as well. The amount of times that Bremer, for example, was struggling. Obviously, Alexandro, I'm not a big fan of his, but yeah, he struggles as well. I'm really looking forward to that Lazio match to see how much Lazio could maybe potentially exploit, especially with the performance they kind of delivered against Napoli. If they do the same against Juventus, we could be seeing a very similar scoreline, if not worse, potentially for Juventus. So I think two contrasting stories. Like James says, though, Juventus always seem to be up there. They seem to be up there despite the kind of performances. And that's, I suppose, the frustrating bit for Juventus fans is they can't get rid of Allegri. They just can't.
No, he's just clinging on for dear life. He is clinging on for dear life. Well, before we talk about Juve, I want to talk about Empoli a little bit, because I think I was looking at their transfers, and you're right, they lost a lot of big players this summer. So they lost Vicario to Tottenham. They obviously, Aslani was on loan anyway, but he disappeared. They lost Parisi to Fiorentina, and they've lost Bajrami, who's gone to Sassuolo. Now, even Vicario, Parisi, and Bajrami were absolutely massive for them last season. Yeah. And I feel like we're really feeling Empoli are really feeling that lack of quality and bringing the new players in. They're just getting used to the system. You look at the players they brought in. They brought in Luperto from Napoli, Ghiazzi from Spezia, who was fine, but he wasn't one of the standout players at Spezia. And then they brought in a centre-back from Cagliari, and that's it. So they have not done enough business. There's not been that. Empoli usually are very good at producing young players, kind of cycling, kind of like Brighton to a less lucrative degree, bringing in young players, selling them onto other Serie A clubs and keeping them to that level. It just feels like they are struggling a little bit. I think they'll be okay because there are worse teams in the league, but we're seeing a much different Empoli team to the one we saw last year. Much, much different. For Juve, yeah, they're always there, aren't they? They've not got the points deduction this time to save us from their fans, unfortunately, so they could actually make a run for it. But Chiesa, talking of making a run for it, you cannot doubt his desire. The effort he put behind that run to get that goal, he wanted every second of that. And I think if we see Chiesa back to pre-ACL injury Chiesa, that could be really, really exciting because he's a hell of a player. But James, you were talking about you kind of got a feeling about Juve this year. Do you think Allegri can redeem himself? What do you see this year that they didn't have last year?
What I see is they don't have a massive point deduction. That is
fair.
Did they finish second last season without the point deduction?
Yeah,
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, considering all the slander they got, that is pretty damn impressive. I mean, I've just had a quick look now. 3 games, 2 wins, 1 draw. Fair enough, a couple teams above them, but they've conceded 1 goal. This is the problem with Allegri football. They'll just bore you to a 2-0 win. You'll watch first 10 minutes, fall asleep by 90th minute, they've won the game. It's like, well, how's that just happened? And this is what I absolutely despise about them. But they have these players, man. They've got Chiesa, they've got Vlahovic. They know where the goal is, and if they just keep that back line solid enough, they got Rabiot, who I really, really rate. I didn't before last season, but last season I thought he had a very good season. Completely out of nowhere. You got scared of the Man United links, thought I need to be linked to a better team.
Sod that. I'm not going there.
Who was it? I think it was Rabiot's mother who saved him or something stupid like that. There's just something about that.
She's
normally
always
does.
there
She normally
somewhere.
does.
She's always in the background
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
She's always
yeah.
there.
Yeah, I just they'll just bore us like 20 clean sheets.
Mhm. I think honestly, you're absolutely right. Whenever I see like it'll be on TNT Sport or whatever, and it's like this Sunday Juventus again, I'm just like, oh god, I'm not watching that one. There's no way I'm watching it. They are just the least entertaining team in the world. But Juve fans don't care. They're not there. Having met and worked with Juve fans on a fairly consistent basis, they don't care about the entertainment. They only care about the wins. That's all they care about.
Yeah.
So they'll be perfectly happy. But yeah, a great start to the season for them, or an encouraging start to the season for them. Maybe we'll see a title challenge. I've enjoyed the last 4 years where they've not really been involved. I've really enjoyed it, but maybe they are back. I think the last game we're going to talk about with Serie A, I want to talk about Inter. They've now 3 wins out of 3, 8 goals scored, 0 goals conceded. Now, they have played Monza, Cagliari, and Fiorentina. So I want to caveat that a little bit. Fiorentina, the first kind of decent team, Monza and Cagliari, that they've come up against. But to then deal with them so handedly in a 4-0 win, I think we are seeing a very, very exciting Inter team here. Thuram getting his first goal for the club, trying to celebrate like Lukaku, and Lautaro giving him the no, we don't do that anymore. Really putting the rumors about the Inter squad vetoing Lukaku's return. It looks like that may be true. Lautaro getting another 2 goals, and Çalhanoğlu from the penalty spot, but a really impressive performance. Sommer only had 1 save to make the entire game. He made it. He's a goalkeeper that Inter fans weren't overly pleased when he came in. But I think looking at Onana's start at United and Sommer's start at Inter, I might be happier with Sommer at the moment. But Adam, Inter, they're looking like they could be the real deal for the title this year.
Probably too early to say that, but yeah, you have to give it to them. 3 games in, they look solid. They look probably stronger than they did last season with this squad. And I think there's been some fantastic bit of business already. We've kind of given them the plaudits already, but I love the Fratesi signing. I love the fact that they got Pavard. I think they are starting to bring down that age as well. They've been relying on these older players. And I know Cuadrado technically set up Lautaro for that magnificent cross kind of volley goal that Lautaro took as well. That was incredible. But yeah, I mean, they're so astute in this marketplace, and Inzaghi is instilling something special down there. It does look like, I mean, if they didn't have to sell Onana, that would look even more incredible, it has to be said. And yeah, I mean, I think Inter fans are just still rejoicing by the fact that they managed to get rid of Correa. I don't know how they managed to pull that off. But
Marseille fans hate him already. Have you seen it on Twitter?
Yeah.
They're all going mad.
They hate him. But genuinely, I think, the real test will be against Milan and the bigger sides as the season goes on. We know there's still that kind of opportunity for Inter to have a bit of a wobbly where they kind of draw a game that they shouldn't have, or they just don't score. So it'll be interesting to see if they can just carry on the momentum that they've had so far. Will this international break actually disrupt it as well, because they're in a rhythm that we've seen that in the past with Inter, right? So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see. But yeah, so far very positive about Inter, and they look the real deal so far.
I think especially with Martinez as well, he's a player that goes through scoring streaks and then will go through droughts. So it'll be interesting to see if he can continue this run, because he's had an incredible start to the season. If he can continue this run on the other side, I think, look, they've still got Alexis Sanchez to turn up, so that average age will still be going up. Don't worry. It'll never not be weird to see Cuadrado in an Inter shirt. I saw him celebrating with Lautaro, and I had to in my head, readjust. Wait, is that real? It will never not be weird. But I think there's a lot of players there that don't get the plaudits they deserve. And one of them is Matteo Darmian. I think people do not talk about how reliable a player that guy is. He was never really a centre-back, I don't think. And now he plays the right-hand side of the centre, the right-hand side of the 3. And he just always looks comfortable. Even in the Champions League run last year, I think he was fantastic. And I think in this game again, and across the start of the season, I think he's been fantastic. So I wanted to give him his plaudits as well. But James, are you excited about Inter this year? Looking at the starting 11, it's a pretty impressive team.
Yeah, I think this is the deepest squad in the league, personally. Inzaghi, this is something I think Inzaghi needs. All his career, his managerial career, he's been a cup manager. That's all he's been known as. And I think we saw last season, especially in the Champions League final, this dude, he knows what he's doing. I'm not going to say he out-coached Pep, but Inter could have won that game against 100%.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for a certain Romelu Lukaku, they arguably would have won that game. I love their squad. I'm a massive fan. Adam, you mentioned him, Benjamin Pavard. I don't know exactly where he played. Actually, played that centre half role. But would he play? Maybe. It's a very solid side, and literally the only thing that I can see stopping them this season is a. That's it. But Inter. They have absolutely impressed me. They absolutely battered Fiorentina. Wasn't even close. Marcus Thuram's a brilliant signing. He's quick. He's physical. He gets into the box. Yeah, I personally like Jan Sommer. I do. From his Mönchengladbach days. Is he the best on the ball? No. He's arguably the worst goalkeeper I've ever seen in person on the ball. I saw him against Portugal in the Nations League a few years ago. I've ever seen. But this dude, he's just a fantastic shot stopper. And Alexis Sanchez, he had a brilliant season at Marseille. Yeah. What's to say he can't have a good season at Inter? He's not lacking Correa. Marseille mothers, so I'm not too surprised.
That's very true. I've seen a lot of vitriol against him on Twitter already, I'll be honest. But I think, guys, we are going to finish there. I think that's all the games we're going to talk about. James, thank you for joining us. It has been fantastic. If our viewers and listeners want to find you, where can they find you online? Where can they find your work?
Oh, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok. I've just started YouTube, Twitter, Deuce Football, DEWSFUTBOL.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for joining us, guys. If you enjoyed it, even if you didn't, just hit the like and subscribe button here. It is not important to us. Just hit those buttons. And as always, you can follow us on Twitter at Italian Anglo Pod, on Instagram at Anglo-Italian Pod, on TikTok at Anglo-Italian Pod. And I think that's everything. We will be back with the show on Friday mornings talking about international football. I don't know. We'll find stuff to talk about. Yeah. Adam, anything to say before we go?
No, just to also say Lecce in fourth. I'd never thought that would happen.
We have to give Lecce,
just hoping your missus isn't listening.
No, she's asleep next door. Don't worry, it is fine. We will leave you there, guys. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time. Ciao.
Ciao.